If you were at a place with your sister, your brother, your best friend, your spouse, and you saw someone snickering and talking about them from a distance, and it was clear they were talking about the one you love, what would you do? Hey everybody, my name is Michelle. This is my so-called Handmade life. I have a blog by the same name. I am Mamatronic on Ravelry and my so-called Handmade life on Instagram. There's also now a Ravelry group for my so-called Handmade life, and you can respond to anything I say here. In the Ravelry group, there is a thread for each episode. If you respond in that thread, I will possibly discuss your response in the next episode. I don't really do that with other threads in that group. But if you want to respond and be part of this conversation, and please do, you can respond on YouTube here or embedded podcasts in my blog. But like I told you, I'm having trouble with my blog and I'm going to switch platforms. Thought it would happen this month, but too many last minute things came up. So maybe February or March. You can always try though. Some people get through. Or the Instagram post that I put about this blog, the podcast, or the thread in the Ravelry group. So that's like 4 places you can comment. And if you do, I'd like to respond to that. And it shifts where the next episode goes. Because I did this to have, to kind of fill a void for communication in my life. I've spent the last few years with a lot of intense time with my grandparents, and they've now passed away. And so, like about a year ago, probably to this week, I started this podcast, and I thought maybe this would help, fill that longing for more conversation and just that sense of community and family. And it really has. It has been wonderful for me. I just need to say thank you to everybody who has commented and responded. I didn't really know if anyone would, and I thought, well, I can always just do this for the fun of it. And then if nobody watched, it could get like sillier and sillier and devolve into, I don't know, nonsense that only I would find interesting. And then I'd have it for that. But it has been an ongoing conversation, and I don't know if I said it last episode, but I have grown so much from your recommendations, the things that you have said, thoughts that you've brought to my mind. I'm still chewing on several things that I've been told either by one of you or something you led me to read, like the idea of grief, giving something back. That's been kind of in the back of my mind the last month or so. There's just always been something to think about. I've had, like, this Katie Bowman, I just got a new book by her. This is a problem I have, diastasis recti, so that's how you say it, or recti, which is the separating of the stomach. I actually had a stomach hernia after my son was born. And anyway, I never would have read any of her books if I hadn't done this podcast, and some of you recommended a podcast that recommended her, and just on and on and on. I can't even track all of the things you brought to my life. And then there's all this thoughtful talk, and some of you talking back and forth with each other, which I've seen more since the Ravelry group started. So if you're not in the Ravelry group and you would like to be part of another Ravelry group, there's just a lot of great people in this group. And I'm doing my best to be really present there. I was a little scared to do a group for that reason, but you all said you would help me out because you understand sometimes life is kind of unpredictable and busy. So that's going really good. I am really trying for once a week posting, especially when I'm doing a knit along. I feel awful about not having more to say about it and to show that you guys are doing. But I had a migraine this week that just caught me off guard. It messed up my sleep. It messed up everything. So it was unpredictable. It wasn't the type that I was talking about. So I didn't quite know how to handle it, and I lost some time. And I've also been doing my test knit that I lost time on because I didn't understand I was chosen as a test knitter. So I lost like 10 days of knitting. And right at the beginning is when I would have really hit it hard before the holidays. So I've been struggling to catch up. So excuses. I wasn't going to say anything about this. You know what I'm going to say, because everybody's starting. I wasn't going to say anything, but I really thought I have nothing to contribute to that conversation. And most everything constructive that can be said has been said. But then it occurred to me that as I read, and you know what I'm talking about, it's a big firestorm on Instagram about racism. It began with one post that offended people of color, and then not just people of color, but white people too. And they explained why it offended them, and they weren't answered appropriately or quickly enough. But the poster did respond and did say they were sorry, but the conversation kept going past, here's what you did that I don't like, and them saying, well, let me think about it, and then, well, you're right, I shouldn't have done it, and I'll keep thinking about it. It went on. There was some hurtful things said back and forth. There was non-constructive things, I think, said. But there was a lot of constructive things said. And then it just kind of went into the whole community, this craft community we talk about. It just went into the whole community in general. How are people marginalized? And I still thought, I don't really have a lot to offer. I know how I live and what I believe, but I have no new information to give. Except as I saw that no one exactly had my perspective on how to handle these situations. There may have been, but I didn't read that. I thought, well, maybe I do have something I should say. And since it's connected to my faith, I felt like, well, I probably should say it. Anyway, and the other reason is for my friends of color, I thought, what if, I would think they would be like, we don't really have to hear what you have to say about this. But if for some reason any of them are feeling a little dejected or on the outside, and it didn't look like I cared, I would hate that. So for you who are my friends that are people of color online, just in case you don't know how I feel about you and how you're treated, I thought I probably ought to say something, because it's better to say too much and look like a doofus than to say nothing and look cold. You know who you are. I wouldn't want you to think, well, I thought we were friends, but maybe she feels like certain other people. And I just have to say, the post that this all came about originally, I'm not going to mention it. I'm not going to link to it. You can find it easy enough if you search on Instagram. And I don't know that there's a point right now, because there are plenty of people putting out their, I don't know, maybe there is a point, because it leads to the discussion that got me thinking. I don't know. I just don't want, this person has said they were sorry. They didn't intend any. I think everyone agrees they meant no harm. Things were said that were seen as hurtful and othering, which is a term I'd never heard before. And I'm just going to be honest. All the new terms that I haven't heard before, they really don't need to be, what's the word, a turnoff to me or anyone, because they're new terms, but for age-old problems, right? othering, exclusivity. I mean, it's discrimination, it's pride, it's favoritism. So these are all just the same old human problems. But if something in me started to think, well, why do we need all these new terms for something that we all know is there? Then I think, but wait, if we all know it's there, why is it still a problem? So maybe new terms help someone see it in a new light. So I don't know if any of you thought that way about it. I'm like way behind on everything culture, like pop culture, Instagram culture. I don't even know how to do a story. So like I was way like, what does this mean? What does this mean? You know, as I'm reading. But I do know human nature, and I understand exclusivity, and I understand what hate or pride or selfish favoritism is. So, but there were some things there. Some of it I hadn't really considered, and terms for it I'd never heard. So I don't know how I'm going to handle this, but I'd appreciate it if you would respond about the issue in general, not about a person. Like, well, they and he and she. I'd rather we didn't talk about people, like just the idea of diversity in the crafting community, what you see on social media, but also maybe in your Ravelry groups. Ravelry's a little different than, to me, than Instagram. There's a little more discourse there, and I feel like stronger connections can sometimes be made. Or what you see in your local community. If you want to talk about that, or maybe like me, if you're going to talk about what you see in yourself, please do comment here on YouTube. You can comment on the blog post if my blog will let you. I know, I'm sorry. The Ravelry thread in my group on that episode 24, this episode, or even on my Instagram post about it, you can if you want to there. I usually post like some picture from the episode and say, oh, there's a new episode up. Maybe you could post there. You can always private message me on Ravelry or Instagram too. But because I'm interested in what your thoughts are, I just don't really want to talk about, well, this person and that person. So, but we can keep this friendly. So the conversation, I didn't want to take part in it online, because by the time it was almost over by the time I heard about it, and I didn't feel like I had anything, as I said, to say. But as I thought about it, there were a few things I thought about that have to do with my faith, which, you know, you don't always share. Not everyone shares that, so you might think, well, it doesn't apply to me. But you'll see that most of this, I think we all know in our hearts, is common sense, good behavior. So my first reaction to it was, okay, I can see how some people would think a person exoticizing, is that the word, another culture, like it's there for their amusement or entertainment. I could see how that might irritate a person. I don't know if it would irritate me, but then again, I come from white privilege. So at first I see all these phrases I'd never seen before. White fragility, never heard of that before, which is basically defensiveness, a need to believe you're right, which seems like a problem in general with everyone. But it's specifically when you don't want to see error in yourself or your culture. But I started looking up some of these things and considering where I fit into it. And I'll just tell you a little bit about me. I grew up in this little white enclave, and my parents raised me to believe that just because we're white, we're not better, we're not superior, we're not better able to handle and run the world. We were not to look down on anyone for their color of their skin, their ethnicity, or their religion. And I believe that, and my parents believed that. My mother was very loving and compassionate toward everyone. However, you only see your parents interact so much when you live in an all-white city. My father didn't work in the city, though, and he fought for equal pay, equal rights at the refinery where he worked. He was very vocal about it. He would never have given, he was a union leader, so he had to represent all sorts of people. He would never have given less representation to someone of color just because he was, I think I mentioned it when he passed away, that he worked toward the equal pay. It happened in the late 60s. It actually allowed some people to, black people is who really were affected at that time, to bump up in rank and seniority. And it displaced some other people who hadn't worked there as long, and there was hard feelings about it, but my father never regretted it. Sorry, my son was being silly talking to the dog, and I said, "Hey, I'm filming." He goes, "Oh, please don't put that in there." So my father, you see where I'm coming from. Yet, had I dated a black man, and I say black because that is where the most tension is where I live, between black and white people, I think my parents would have been uncomfortable. And the thing I always heard that generation say was, "We understand, there's nothing wrong, people of color, but I just feel sorry for the child." You know, like if you have a child, their life is just over. They'll never fit here, they'll never fit there. Well, I mean, there may be some people that's their story, but they don't know that. Nobody living in my all-white city knew that. So I always had in my mind, I mean, you love who you love. It doesn't matter what their skin color is. Still believe that. However, I'm in an all-white city, and I basically married someone I met when I was 18 in an all-white city, okay? So that never happened. But I guess my point is, I feel like my parents were pretty enlightened, but there's still holdover stuff where you live. So, you know, I move away, my husband and I, and we actually live in a city that's a little larger, a more diverse population, and we were part of a church. The point of the church, one of its founding mission statement kind of, was that it would be a place where anyone would feel welcomed just coming off the street. They wouldn't have to feel like they had to look a certain way, dress a certain way, know a bunch of churchy catchphrases, and it wouldn't matter what their ethnicity was, their skin color. I was really excited about that, and something in me was like, yes, this is the kind of environment you've always wanted to live in. This is what you've always wanted to be part of. And so it was really good. It was great. And these were my friends and my peers, and we represented a lot of different ethnic backgrounds, cultural backgrounds. And so when we moved from that city, I was disappointed to come home, but we needed to. And within a year of coming home, it was really a very good thing that it all worked out the way it did, because then my grandparents started to need me. But when we came home, we wanted to live by our relatives. We get this crummy little rent house. It's like, it was on piers, and the whole house, to me, it looked like it just did this. Like someone took it and went crunch. But we could keep our dog and cat, and the dog could be in and out. It was like a miracle. Very hard to find that. And it was very affordable. I've always known, if we had been black, my husband and I, we would not have gotten that rental. It wouldn't have happened. And it was a man of color that rented it to us, but he wasn't black, and black probably wouldn't have worked. My husband and I were talking the other day, would he have made enough that I wouldn't have had to work full time? Probably not at some of his jobs, if he were black. And depending on where we were. We've lived several different cities. And I've worked part-time, but I've always been able to really be there for my kids, and then I was able to be there for my grandparents. If we were both, I don't know. If we were both working, my grandparents would have probably had to go to a nursing home. And that almost happened with my grandfather anyway, because of his health needs, but it would have happened way sooner. I was really so happy to be able to be there with him. That's just one example of how, if I just had darker skin, that might not have happened for me, being able to be there for them. Then there's the city that we want to live in, close to our family. I went to school there. I knew the area. My kids were in school there, and they have a really good school system. And you can be really bright and you can work really hard, but if your school system doesn't guide you toward it, you might not get accepted to the school you want or get the scholarships you need. We are not wealthy people. My kids could have worked their way through school, but because of certain exceptional teachers, they just guided them, counselors saying, hey, apply for this, apply for that. They got really good scholarships. My daughter now is an advisor at another campus, and she's like, totally realizes her white privilege is why she had her college paid for. So these are just a couple of examples from my life, but think about the big impact. I'm not struggling right now with these health issues, none of which are officially serious, but like the forgetfulness and exhaustion and the headaches are terrible. I might have to be working full time to keep a kid in school, and I'm not doing that. But it might have been different were my skin darker. And I know I wouldn't have lived in this city, or else I would have struggled to live in the city, and we would have had to give our animals to the Humane Society. And they might have been put down. One of them was older, it probably would have happened. Maybe that seems small. It's not small to me. So yes, I know, and I've known I benefit from white privilege. But what I didn't know is, so what do I do about it? Because now I'm home, and I'll be honest, the last several years, my focus has been on just maintaining everybody's health, my family, my grandparents. My plate felt full. I didn't think about a lot of larger things. Now I'll tell you, if anyone was ever unkind to someone because of their skin color, or talked trashy like that, or said racial slurs around me, I would say something. Now if it was in a large place, like some yahoo in a football stadium, and I hear him yell, I don't know if I'm going to stand. I wouldn't have probably stood up and yelled back. But definitely if someone said it to me or close to me enough that I could reach them and say something, yeah, I would have spoken up. But how often is that going to happen? It doesn't happen that much. So I have my online friends, but we all just talk about knitting, So like, this is an example. This is like one of the first times I've had space to think about what next. What next about this feeling inside of me that I've had for some time, and moving back to this city especially, I want to be part of change. So where do I start? If I just wait for something to be brought to my attention, it may not happen very often. But this thing happened this week. So a thing I noticed about the conversation online, I felt that it took a lot of twists and turns. It veered off the subject a little of, this is what is offensive about this, and this is why. And then eventually someone saying, I'm sorry, I'll think about this. I'm going to read this stuff. I didn't want to offend. I think everyone agrees there was no intention of offense. But now, how do I not do it in the future? And so there was a lot of constructive talk. And one thing recommended was this workbook, Me and My White Supremacy workbook by Layla F. Saad, S-A-A-D, I think is how you say it. And I'll put the name here. And everything is always in the description notes, or in the Ravelry group notes, or on my blog post. Even if you can't leave a comment, you can always click on the links there. So all this will be linked. I may not link the actual Instagram post where all this took place. I don't really want somebody to be piled on any further. I think once it's made clear, there's really nothing else we can do. Anyone can do. And I personally can see from that woman's perspective, because it might have been me that would say something inadvertently that would hurt somebody. It totally could be. I was thinking the other day, sometimes I'm just doofy and I don't know what other people know. Like, I said Oriental, and you don't say that now. And I didn't even know. I mean, I was talking about food, and my son-in-law was like, I think that's really considered offensive now. I was like, really? I didn't know that. So, I mean, I think it only comes up when we're talking about food, but there you go. I mean, there's a lot I don't know. So, and also, if it just doesn't come up in your life, it doesn't come up in your life. Why would various racially offensive things come up in my life when I'm white and I live in an all-white community? Which puts the burden of finding ways to be different on me. I mean, so this could be me that this could have happened to. It could have been. I don't know if I said this already, but one of the things the thing I could see that happened was exoticism. It's basically exploiting, an attitude of exploiting people or a culture or a place for your own amusement. Like not quite seeing them, the value of people there. It's just more like me and my experience, you know. I've seen people do that. I've gone on some mission trips and a lot of people feel that it's debatable how good those are. I feel like good happened in these trips, and but I do think some people went for that very reason, and I've seen, they weren't people from my church, but people be rude and unkind about the food they're served. I was so ashamed. But I thought, have I done that? And when I went to Iceland, I know I was totally visually wanting to exploit the heck out of that place. I just wanted to walk in this crack and touch this rock, and oh man, the landscape, I just wanted to, I don't know, melt into it or something. It's not that I didn't care about the culture or the history. I was really interested in all of that, and everything I've read about it I've been interested in. And I love the sagas, and I'm going back. But it was a quick jaunt. It was to see the land. I wasn't going to make friendships in 5 days, especially not traveling the whole time. So maybe that's exoticism. I don't know. It didn't have an exploitative feel to me, but I don't know. So here's what I can do. Living where I do, I can keep doing the things I've already done. I know what I believe. I can keep living those beliefs out. I can keep telling my family. I can stand up for other people. Oh, and another thing that I've always done is if I'm at some event or something, once in a while I'm really shy. But it's not usually when I go to a thing. It's usually like when I'm at the grocery store and I'm like looking really rough and I just want to hurry through the store. But if I go to an event or something, I will often look for somebody sitting by themselves or who seems to feel marginalized. That's who I'll want to sit by and talk to. I can keep doing that kind of thing. I don't know how big a difference that makes, but I can, if I hear someone say a slur from far away, I can stand up and yell back, "Shut up," you know. I had a lesson in the class I teach in my church. I learn with them, but they're young adults. And it was actually about racial division in the church and discord. And it was so fitting after this week, reading all these things on Instagram. And I asked them, if you were at a place with your sister, your brother, your best friend, your spouse, and you saw someone snickering and talking about them from a distance, and it was clear they were talking about the one you love, what would you do? And there were mixed reactions. Most everybody is very non-confrontational. And these are young people, and they were like, might make a face, turn and walk away, get out of there, not have anything to do with those people. I said, what if they came right up to your loved one and they got in their face and said these things? What would you do? It was still a varied response, because they're like, well, did my loved one do something to deserve it? But basically they would want to take up for the person they care about. And I said, well, how would you feel if it was you and nobody took up for you? And different ones, everyone pretty much said it would hurt. They'd probably forgive. They might even understand why their loved one would feel uncomfortable being part of a scene, but it would hurt. I said, well, that's how, and this is the context of believers in the church. But believers who look different, or from a different background, cultural background, or different skin color, something like that. That's how it is for them if we don't take up for them. We need to be ready. So I thought about what goes into walking somewhere with somebody who you've seen mistreated before. How would I act? I know exactly how I'd act. I'd all of a sudden be puffed out and ready, have my alert look going, my guard up. I would be ready to defend and protect. I would be looking, like just keeping my eyes scanning, looking for trouble. I would have all this protective stuff going on. So why is it not going on now? I don't approach life that way. Even my friends on Instagram, I really haven't seen any of them personally attacked or anything, but I need to have that mindset of protectiveness. And that, the lesson, the verses I was talking about, this has to do with believers in the church, but what if somebody's not a believer in my faith? I still want to have a protectiveness for other people. So their value, just protecting them. Because whether you believe what I believe or not, the Bible says all people were made in God's image. So there's a level of protectiveness I should feel for everyone. And of course I want to feel that, but these are just things I can do. Just talking about me. I haven't read the workbook yet, so I'm sure it's going to be full of stuff. It's going to be very eye-opening. Some things also, I can make myself talk more, talk out. I can listen. I looked up a bunch of verses on racial discord in the church. There's verses, and you know what? I'm going to have some of these, just the references probably. I'm not going to list them, write them all out, because it'll be too long for YouTube. There's verses on iron sharpening iron. Let each other's, your differences sharpen one another. So when I listen to somebody who, even if I think at times there were people who I think were too harsh in this Instagram thing, they wished a person's business and harm, them harm. That's too much. But what if that person still said some point that I could apply to myself? I don't have to like everything about what a person says to listen to it. I can just consider, is this me? Is this true? And then filter out what I don't believe is good and keep what I know is true or good. So iron sharpening iron. And that's what has happened to me just reading other people's things. And I just felt like this roller coaster of emotion. Feeling for everyone on every side. That sharpens me as a person. I can put myself in another person's place. Walk a mile in someone else's shoes. I can totally do that. And shouldn't I? And that's Christ's teachings. Love your neighbor as yourself. Treat other people like you would want to be treated. It's not that hard. I can do my part to undo what has been done to people who can't get the house they need to rent so that they can live by their elderly relatives and can't afford to have a stay-at-home mom, or the dad has to work 2 jobs, or the mom does, or whatever, because they're not getting the best position because of their skin color. I don't even know how prevalent that is anymore in other areas. I don't know what it's like in the rest of the country. But I can do my part to dismantle that. I don't know. I don't even really know what that would be. I don't have a lot of influence or power in this world, but I can always say what I think. And in every way, just like I said, I'm in a group, and say I look and I see a person of color sitting by themselves, and there's other people and they look like, I don't know, I don't look like a soccer mom, but they're soccer moms or white soccer moms or whatever. They're people who look like me. I could go sit with someone I don't know. That's easy for me to do, but you know how people are. I mean, I know a lot of people in an all-white community. They still, they want to know who's going to be there before I go to this function, because I need to know who I'm going to sit with. And we're talking about grown adults, you know. I don't have to be that way. So what if you find yourself a little offended at the idea that you have offended someone or benefited from white privilege or something like that? I know a lot, I actually know some people, white people, who have suffered horribly at the hands of other white people. And they might, I don't know, understanding and connecting with someone who feels victimized might come very easy to someone like that. Or it might just feel a little overwhelming, like, what have I done now? You know, I don't know. We can always be self-reflective and just consider, did I, is there something else I can work on? You know, I don't have to be too proud to change. I can inconvenience myself, especially in just no-brainer, easy ways. Like I said, I didn't know the word Oriental was offensive. It seemed old-fashioned, but whenever we had Asian food as a kid, which was not often, we had soul food, Southern food mostly, but it was called Oriental food. So I'm like, okay, I can change that. That's easy. And I don't have to be too proud. I can admit my flaws. James 5:16 talks about confessing your sins to each other. I can admit my flaws. It's really good to do, to stay humble, and it keeps you accountable. You can't start pretending that you really don't have that problem anymore if you admit it to someone. When somebody has done wrong or offended, if it were me, if it were someone else, we can forgive. I could be forgiven. And then we can, 1 Peter 4:8-11 says, love covers a multitude of sins. We could forgive and encourage someone. Give someone a high five when they're changing. When you see someone making an effort to change, oh my gosh, give them a little push, something to encourage it. 1 Corinthians 12:25-27, it says, if one of us suffers, all of us suffer. It's talking about the church, but I really see it as mankind too. When one of us suffers, because in the church we are certainly not supposed to put ourselves above other people, which is what suppression of or oppression of other races and people of ethnicities, you know, that's all that is. If one of us suffers, all of us suffer. That concept is really strong and powerful. We're told to carry one another's burdens with them. If it's too heavy, we put it on our back. If it's too heavy for them, we put it on our back and we carry it. So how can I carry the burden that some of my friends of color feel by how they're treated in this world, how they're treated online? Some of them maybe have had tacky things, rude or unkind things, maybe really, really unkind, I don't know, said to them recently if they entered into that conversation. How can I carry the burden? Well, I can take up for them online, or I can say something about how I feel. Be protective. Leviticus 19:15-18. This is all from a Christian perspective. Rebuke your neighbor frankly, so you won't share in their guilt. I've never read that before. That one's tough, because where I live, and it says, Just like, what is the point of trying to fight the tide here? I'd be spending every single second arguing maybe or something. In school, when you hear things and it's tough to say something in response because nobody might agree with you, rebuke your neighbor, frankly, so you don't share in their guilt. That was powerful. That one really speaks to me. Don't seek revenge or bear grudges. That would be a person who's offended. That would be words of wisdom for them. Value others above yourself. Philippians 2:3-16 talks about all that. Putting other people first. Be humble and gentle. That could be someone like me who needs to be careful with what they say. Say it gently. You're less likely to offend anyone if you think gentle thoughts. Then it says, be patient, bearing with each other in love. That applies to somebody who's been wronged or hurt or feels excluded. That's Ephesians 4:2-6. Don't think highly of yourself, but instead think of yourself with sober judgment. That would be to people who think, I'm doing good. I haven't called anyone you know what, but we think, I don't need to change. This isn't for me. Well, don't think too highly of yourself. Like, I need to consider who I've been and where I'm headed, how I'm acting today with sober judgment. Romans 12. Also in that same set of verses, it says to be devoted to one another. If you are devoted to someone, are you going to let a conversation drop where they've been wounded? I say that, I wouldn't want to ever let a conversation just drop where someone's been wounded, but after a point, I'm also not going to post and hound somebody every day. I just think you got to be willing to keep talking and to put yourself out there on their behalf. Bless those who persecute you. Bless them and don't curse. That's Luke. I don't know where in Luke. I'll have all my links. I'm the worst. I have no memory with numbers, so I really need Google. Anyway, these are just some things that came to my mind from a Christian perspective, that if we handle things this way, from any side of this issue, any perspective, it would de-escalate. But the point is, the two places where it can escalate is when we refuse to listen and see. Just chew on it. Does this describe me? This wasn't even my account that this all came up on, but I still needed to see, where am I in here? And then the other place where we can escalate things is when somebody acknowledges they're wrong, which just almost never happens ever today. I'm blown away when someone says simply, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to upset you. I'm going to think about all you said. I want to change this. I want to make this right. It just almost never happens. So that's a huge deal. So not accepting that also escalates things, I think. I don't have to only stay in my little town. I can branch out, obviously, and I have. I'm involved in a really great Bible study that is, one woman described it as what she envisions heaven is like, with all sorts of people from all sorts of walks of life, all sorts of ages. It's women, and it is from just graduated from high school up to in the 90s. Every skin color there is. There are people who don't even speak English there, and the literature for BSF is it's available in just so many languages that these ladies actually, people who come from China, most of them I don't think feel confident with their English, but so many, because of word of mouth, and so many started coming that they actually formed a group and can speak to one another well about it, plus the literature is translated, and so it really helps out their the facilitator of the group who doesn't know Chinese. That was really exciting. Just constantly accommodating is the point. The whole goal is, oh yeah, everybody, come on. I love it. I love working together. I might flash a picture of my little bitty group that I work with, that we work with the children together. It's that feeling that I was talking about that I always like when it feels like a real slice of the real community in my country. And we all have this common goal. It's just a wonderful experience. And we just don't think about differences, but I feel like everyone there is kind of like-minded in that way. But that is something that I've been able to be a part of, and it's been really wonderful. So beyond that, I'm not sure. I'm not sure where it will go. I know I just don't want to be I just don't want it to be something I post once on an Instagram post and say, I'm for diversity, you know, and then nothing happens with it. But I have a feeling this workbook, I've heard it's challenging and it's physically draining. In fact, the lady who wrote it, she said that you may just need to take some time and take care of yourself, because this may be really hard for you to go through and to see in yourself. So I'm not sure what to expect. I'm excited though about it, because I like to grow. One of the things that came up was that in the craft community at large, you don't see a lot of representation of people of color. Like, this is Knitwet. I think this is the last physical print copy they had. You can see there's people of color in this featured in this as either models or people that are actually featured with articles written about them. That's just the first one next to me. There's, look at this. They're all around me, actually. It's much more common now, which is a wonderful thing. Marlisle, I got the book. I couldn't not. And her technique, let me just say, her technique on Ruperto might be what I use for my, let's see, here we go. You know, so we're seeing people, all sorts of different faces reflective of our country, or this lady isn't, Anna Maltz isn't from America, but reflective of the world, you know, that's all good. It's more common now, but if I can see how my husband and I would not have made enough, possibly where we live, were we not white, to get by the way we did, we would have had to make some major changes that would not have benefited our family, then I'm sure I can see how other people are struggling to get their businesses off the ground when they're not white. So that's also something I can do. I can maybe make a decision, since I want to counterbalance this. I think I might put my money towards someone who really needs it right now, or my attention or focus toward that. I'm not sure how that'll look, but anyway, there's just some ideas that I got personally, and I just wanted to share how I feel like we're supposed to handle one another. So that's my 2 cents. It's really long, but just in case any of my friends out there wonder where I stand on this, because I was like really quiet about it. And I'm also a nobody online, so it's not like anyone's looking to see, what does Michelle have to say about this issue? It's just that it's like, I don't know. I just wouldn't want, I would rather go overboard making sure that where I stand is seen than look like I don't care. The only reason I'm talking about this, because like I said, other than some Bible verses, which you may or may not find helpful, that's pretty much all I had to say that's not been said already. Okay, so on to the knit along. And let me say, Dawn Colbert, she said, maybe 2 episodes ago, she recommended a website. It was a site, idrawfashion.com. So it's all free fashion templates, and I'm gonna have a link for that. Thank you, Dawn, for sharing that. I don't think I mentioned it, and I realized it the next episode, and then I just wanted to throw it out there. If you're still looking for like a template, or you want to start playing around with drawing out a design, I don't know with knitwear how helpful that will be, like a hat, you know, or a maybe with a sweater it would be helpful. You saw my sad little renderings, just so I could remember if I wanted to do split hem or high-low or drop shoulder, that it might make a difference for a larger garment. So anyway, thank you, Dawn, for that recommendation. Also, Brooke had said that when we talked about our most worn knits, she had said a pair of black mittens made with cheap yarn, nothing special, but she just wore the heck out of them and misses them. I think that she wore them out, if I remember correctly. So would be something she needs to replace. So I kind of left those things out. So test knit is what I've been working on. Let me show it to you because I don't have anything for our It Cowl. This is a test knit for Shannon Kook, and it's gonna fit me, I know that. I've got the body finished. The construction of these pockets was great. I haven't, they're still not sewn together. Working on a sleeve. It's that great texture that we talked about. I've never used this texture before. I love it. It's made from the reverse side, basically. I think that when all the measurements are correct, I'm kind of long torsoed, so I think when I block it, I might do my initial block as a tester, but then I might block it for a little more length because I really like a long cardigan. And I'm also doing a size 34. For an open cardigan, that should work for me. You know, lots of information you may not need. I'm small chested, but at the same time, the rest of my body frame doesn't always necessarily go with a 34. I have larger arms. At least I do right now. I have for the last few years. And my stomach. So this will work great. It fits. But like I said, I've kind of been enjoying a more oversized fit. So I might even block it a little larger. But it totally fits right now. It's going to be a very comfortable fit. There's lots of room in the arm. It's great. So that's what's been distracting me, that and headaches. So I wanted to show you a thing I did. I winged it on. I showed you pictures of this. It's my bus stop pullover is what I call it. I used Elizabeth Zimmerman's percentage method for a yoke sweater, a colorwork yoke. That is from her Knitting Without Tears book. I'm just going to scoot up so you can see the little... Can you see what these are? They're little Totoros, you know, from My Neighbor Totoro. And then on the sleeves, I did little umbrellas. So, don't know if you can see those. Just because I had extra yarn, and I was like, well, okay, this was not the most attractive sweater ever. The fit is great. It's a perfectly fitting sweater. Let me see if you can see. It's got a little ease, but it's kind of fitted. It's not, it fits. It looks good. Everything about it is perfect. If it were solid colored, great. I just picked kind of an odd colorwork design. And I found a free Totoro chart for some free pattern on Ravelry. I have a post on this on my blog, and I'll link to it in the notes. But I had to change it up some to make the numbers, as you know, as you're increasing, to make them fit with this. So I wanted it to look like Totoros and not bunnies. I don't know how close I got. Plus, this is not high contrast yarn, but it was dash yarn, which is always great. And I sort of did it last minute. I think I did it for Full and Vine's, Kristen's classic knits cowl. And it was about knitting some classic sweater design that's kind of considered a modern classic or an old-fashioned classic. that you've always wanted to do but you haven't done. And so I did a featherweight, maybe for that, but I know I did this for that. So I was winging it totally, but Elizabeth makes it really easy. You know all the stitches and the numbers you need, and you do it based on your measurements. So really all you're doing is fitting a design in and saying, how many stitches do I need for this? And then multiply it around and see how many of these totoros you can fit. It was a little challenging. It was fun though, and I'd never done anything like it before. If I can do it, you guys can do it. So, hang on, let me get a sip of water. So our knit along is called the It Cowl. Don't think I'm not interested just because I haven't started my project. Please, please, please. And I think I'm going to extend this past February because I feel like I've given it a poopy start by not being more active. But I'm trying to figure out the whole headache business, and I had to do this thing. And let me just say, if I hadn't made a mistake about being selected as a test knitter, that sweater would have already been finished by now. So I'm super into this knit along, and I'm going to continue doing it for myself personally well past the end of the knit along, and I hope all of you will too. So lots of you are talking about the things you're doing in the Ravelry group, and I wanted to have it all together, all the information, things you know that are being worked on. I just wasn't together enough. I've got a lot going on, and we have a little last minute surprise trip, but we're taking for my husband's job. He wants me to go with him, and I want to go. It's also almost my birthday, so it's kind of going to double as a birthday thing. So I'm like desperately trying to get ready. It's going to be major clothes washing day tomorrow. What was I going to say? Some of you are modifying. I may have said this in the last week. I think I showed some pictures, lots of pictures. It was photo heavy. That's why it took so long to edit. I can't do that this week, but you know, you're modifying cowls. You're taking a lace pattern from one thing and putting it on another. Adina had just panicked because she got called to substitute teach, and she's like, I don't have anything I can fit in my purse and bring to knit during study hall. So she just grabbed a ball of yarn and some sock needles, and she just cast on. She knows her cast on for a sock, so she just casts on and just starts making up a little pattern for the leg of a sock, and it looks great. That is so clever, and it's really what is it, necessity, I don't know, what is it, invention? Necessity is the mother of invention? I don't know. That's what happened with her. And just like a lot of us, we have like, okay, I've got this 2 balls of yarn, they match, what can I make with this? Let me just make something up. And it's really inspired me to want to use stash this year. I have some sweater quantities I've told you, and things like Cascade or Wool of the Andes, and I want to go ahead and do it, use them, and you know, you'll see something new come out and it takes 1,000,000 skeins, you're like, I don't quite have that, or you see something that comes out, it doesn't take near what you have, and you're like, well, I hate to have 2 extra. I can just make something that has the yardage I have. I can use it exactly as much as I want. It's kind of motivation for me to use my stash. So I wanted to show you a couple of other modifications I've made in patterns just to kind of encourage you, especially if you're on the fence about doing this. I mean, there's no reason to. Like I said, you can just practice a new stitch and make a square. It doesn't even have to be a perfect square. It could be a dishcloth. That's what we're talking about. This modification barely counts as a modification maybe to you, but I enjoyed it. This is Cumberland by Jennifer Kelly from Appalachian Knits, and isn't this just really pretty yarn? There's low contrast here, but I love both of these yarns so much. It is, well, Jinx yarns when she was dyeing, and you can see the stripe here is subtle. It was a charcoal color and lavender tea, and so this is the lavender tea colorway in the lace. Jennifer's design called for sport weight, or DK yarn. I think sport weight. All I had was fingering, so I went with it. I had the same amount of fingering called for in sport weight, and I just made it in fingering. I blocked a little bit extra, maybe, but not really. And it's a large enough shawl that it works fine. And maybe it being a little lighter weight makes it a little more wearable for someone who lives where I do. You see, I mean, there's no shortage of length here. It fits just fine. So, it's warm in here, though. That was an easy modification. That counts as modifying. Another one, this is Kate Gagnon Osborne. Her Selbu Modern hat, and it's like kind of like a beret. It's pretty colorful and it looks pretty intricate, doesn't it? Let me take it off for you to see. Lots of color changes there. But if you know this pattern, you know what I did. I just used a color changing yarn. I don't even remember which one I used, actually. I think it was Noro, maybe Garden. It's like a singles base. Garden something. Anyway, it changes on its own. So you can take a color changing yarn, a gradient of some sort, or like this one that doesn't, it's not really a gradient, and you can just put it in a 2-color pattern. So you have the base color, and then instead of just solid blue all the way up or whatever color, you use this color changing yarn, and it gives it a sense of, I don't know, intricacy that maybe wasn't there before. This also looks really great in a 2-color version, but I really enjoyed that, and that was my first time to do Selbu. So that is traditional Fair Isle where you knit with 2 hands, and I did. I used 2 hands. That's a nice, pretty nice floats there, considering. And it was also my first time to use any sort of gradient or color change yarn. So I have another pattern I would like to do that with, but it's designed for it, and it's a picture of like trees, and the background is done in the color changing yarn, and it gives it the look of Northern Lights to me. That's what I wanted. I wanted to make it before I went to Iceland, but you know, that never happened. So those are some examples of modifications I've made that are very simple to do. Some of you in the Ravelry group are dyeing your own yarn. Some of you are spinning your own yarn to then dye and then come up with something. Sweaters that are being cropped that weren't originally cropped, and they're being knit intentionally big. People are going. They're in the process of doing color work. Sweaters and vests of their own. Changing color work hat pattern. Just little things like that. You guys are doing a lot in there. Kat is doing a new design, and so she's just including it in the group because she's always winging it. She's always just she casts on and she just starts something. And I guess she does ripping back. I don't notice it. Like, she's done this in several very Shannon knit-alongs. I haven't noticed her doing a lot of ripping back. It just feels like she just does it perfectly from start to finish. That's happening. A Norwegian Dachshund hat that I was telling you about, where she changed the pattern just a little to better represent her pets. There is there's talk of over dyeing and how to do that, and lots of people coming up with color palettes. So I showed you my color palette the other day, but you know, I left one out. I got 4 colors of Briggs & Little, and this is their heritage, so it's like an Aran or worsted. And you can see these 2 blues. I'm not going to use both. What I think I'm going to do, this is my base. This will be my main color to use in a tartan type. I'm just going to do a tartan plaid, I think. Maybe has a little textural look, I'm not sure. I think these will be feral plaid, and then I'll have just like an accenting stripe in this, which I might do by just crocheting stitches. I don't know, because it'll probably just be one row across and then like one row crocheted up. So what I did was I just looked at a million versions of tartans out there, and this is kind of what I'm thinking right here. So you have your two main colors, your pale background, the dark blue would be my brownish green, and then you've got your one little accenting contrast stripe, and that would be my light teal. So that's what I'm thinking of doing all over, or maybe just the body and leave the sleeves plain, or make the sleeves the accent color and then be plain. I haven't decided. I've thought about 100 different ways I could do this. I also thought of just doing more textural and less of the Fair Isle, but I think I'm just going to do this because I initially thought of it. But I found a pattern. It's not the same. It's brioche, but it was interesting to me and I wanted to show you guys. It's Buffalo Brioche by Zandy Peters. Did I tell you last week? And she has another one out, Tattersall Tartan, I think. But this is her, can you see the brioche there? I can always put a better picture. Here we go. Let me do this. So she's doing that plaid, but with brioche, which is interesting. You're seeing the front color and the back. Really neat. And it makes, kind of like we talked about in the book Moral, the combination of the two main colors creates a third, and that's what those brioche sections that use both colors do. Really neat to me. So the things going on, it's probably going to go past February. Please join in. And I'm just like casting on this thing, and I'm going to make this big giant, probably misshapen sweater. Hopefully it'll look better than Theo's shirt that Denise made on the Cosby Show, and whatever happens, happens. I'm interested to see. I asked you guys what your inspirations were this year for trying new things. And I'd said that Junko Okamoto's plum really inspired me to just want to cast something on. And the fact that it's a one-size pattern, it can be customized to fit different sizes, but it's just sort of a, hey, let's see where this goes kind of thing. I love that. It felt a little freeing for me, because I knew it's meant to be big, but I'd seen it fit, more fitted, and look great. So I was like, can I really go wrong here? So I asked you guys who's inspired you this year. Melanie of Braid and Tinker podcast, she said that doing the Winterfell sweater gave her more confidence to wing it. I think that's Ellie of Skandir Knits, her sweater pattern. It's great. I love Melanie's version of that. And it made me want to knit the pattern. I liked the pattern before when I saw it, but I really, really liked Melanie's version. And she did some things to it. She added waist shaping. Hush. She added waist shaping and short rows in the back hem. But she liked it because the pattern, it gave it all the information, but she said it didn't do a lot of hand holding, and that encouraged her to just wing it a little, and it worked for her. She really enjoyed the sweater. Well, some of you said your goals for the year, which I didn't officially mean to ask, but I was going to ask it this episode. So I'm going to save the goals and talk about them next week. So the rest of you definitely be thinking what your goals were. Kathy had said that this podcast really inspired her to want to take her knitting skills, and she has a lot of fiber skills, to the next level and do something she's always wanted to do, which was make up her own sweater design. And now she's doing it, and she's excited about it. So I'm so glad that I could help be that little push. Sometimes that's all we need, is a little nudge out of our normal comfort zone of what we do. Sarah had said the same thing, that this knit along has encouraged her to want to do that. And I thought it has me too, because I think with all the stuff that's come up last minute in January, I think I would have already abandoned the whole plaid thing I was going to do with this. I would have just said later. And then I would have probably joined some other knit-alongs and got lost in a bunch of new projects, and it might not have happened anytime soon. So you guys are also encouraging me the same way. And then she also frogged her an old sweater to use some Barocco ginkgo yarn, which is like a worsted wool silk blend, to do a phoenix of her own. And Jen's going to do a phoenix too. I'm excited to see those because I love that pattern. Frauke had said that her inspiration for wanting to try new things, be a little more creative, is her budget. It's sort of a goal too for her in the coming year. She's going to have a daughter going to college, and she just wants to use what she has and find things that works with the fabric and the wool stash that she's got on hand. So scrappy projects, just anything she can make fit. And I like the way she talks about it. She said it inspires her to be creative the way our grandmothers were. Because she can't give up her crafting. It's her therapy. So I agree. And looking at it as a way to be closer to, your ancestors, and to become a little more creative in your thinking, problem solving, like what do I do with this and how do I avoid amassing more stuff, buying more stuff. And I thought that is really a good way of looking at it, because rather than denying yourself more stuff, it's more like you're revealing your own creativity. You're uncovering it or inventing it, You're making something more of yourself. You're giving yourself more abilities, more tools, instead of just denying yourself one more skein of yarn. I like that. Jen's inspiration this year for her exploring colorwork sweaters and making them for family members was her grandmother, who used to make them for her family. And there was like a Snoopy sweater, she said, and one of her sons got a Cookie Monster sweater, and these are just cherished family heirlooms now, and that inspired her. So that's sweet. I wanted to have something that my great-grandmother made to show you all. I think I'll have it for the next episode, but I'm kind of rushing on this before I leave so that I get an episode up. When I think of the Depression era that my grandparents grew up in and how crafty my great-grandmother was, let me show you. This is something my grandfather did. My grandparents were all about saving and making use of things. And so this is a crochet hook my grandfather made for my grandmother. And she used to crochet a lot. I think he might have whittled this for her while they were camping. I don't know if it was because she needed a hook or he just did it because, but it's nice and smooth and it feels store-bought and it's pretty. Just a little kind of appropriate crafty thing they did. But they were always doing something crafty, making use of things and reusing things. They were big on that. Once I stayed with them as a girl when my mom was sick, and I didn't realize till the last minute on a Sunday that I had a major project due the next week, and I was going to need some kind of physical art project to go with it. I think it was on medieval times, and so we came up with something that they had. They had an old yardstick in the garage, and my grandfather took it, and they really totally helped me do this. He didn't want me to use a knife. He whittled the edge of the yardstick down like a sword, and then he cut it and took a piece and made the little cross, what do you call it, for the hilt, and had some paint. He might have went and bought the paint, spray painted it silver and the handle gold, and then me and my grandmother took poster board, and we made like a round helmet thing, and the bottom kind of for the mouthpiece, the jaw, it hinged with a brad and it would open. My teacher went on and on about that, and I just was totally thinking, go Grandmommy and Papa, because I totally would have failed without their help, and I was panicked. And they felt sorry for me because we were going through a lot, and they probably thought I was a mess. But yeah, they were really crafty that way. And kind of like Frauke was saying, they just made do with what they had a lot. Seeing if there was another example in here. Oh, my grandmother always would cut and paste photos. She would remove someone's head from one photo where they looked good, but no one else did, and she would put that head in a photo where that person didn't look so good. And she was pretty good at it. You couldn't always tell until you got right on the photo. And I was going through their photos to make a slideshow for the funeral, and I found a few like that. And I thought she'd probably get upset with me if I scanned them because it would show. But it would have been so her to do, and you know, we all knew she was like that. My great-grandmother, my grandfather's mom, I called her Nanny. She darned socks, though she didn't knit. She crocheted really intricate things, and I think she might have done some tatting too, because a member of our Ravelry group does tatting, and I looked it up, and I thought, this really looks like some of her fine work for doilies and things. But my grandmother always said that she kept all of their clothes going for like 20 years. Like underclothes, they never had to buy anything new for like 20 years. Things were made better back then to begin with, but she would just patch and fix and hem and darn, and she just kept them all in clothing. Little Kitten was saying that, like, I'm going to do with my project here with this yarn, just cast on and whatever happens, happens. She likes that way of knitting. And then if it doesn't fit her, she can always pass it along to someone else. It's more about the process for her than the product. I think I've got, I think I covered all of your inspirations that you said. I wanted to mention also that Origin Scholar on Ravelry, I really appreciate her telling me this. I was worried about switching my blog. What if I lose posts because I messed with the code so much? And she told me about a website called the Wayback Machine. And I'll have a link to that too. And it's you can type in any old web address and it will give you cached images and that are stored somewhere, because they're all somewhere. And she said you might be able to find any lost posts that you can't place. You might find them through a search engine like that. So I was really appreciative of that. It helps me feel a little better about moving forward with this. I appreciate that. Well, I was going to tell you guys about a few little things that I've looked at. Sarah Jane had mentioned it's a little bit part of her goals, and so I'll talk about it next week, but she said she was reading the book Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. I keep wanting to say Melissa Gilbert from Little House on the Prairie. This book, I've heard, I think Libby Johnson talked about it. Several people have said it's a really good read for just getting you to think creatively in all areas of your life. And the other day I had noticed it was $1.99 on Amazon Kindle, and I thought, well, let me just get that book and read it. I've heard so much about it for so long. It's kind of probably a New Year's special, because it's one of those books, you know, like The Happiness Project, where people want to look at a new year differently. By the way, I haven't forgotten this book. I'm still going to read it. I just, you know, a lot came up and now I'm scrambling to keep up. I probably won't get much read in this till after the knit along though. Moderating a Ravelry group takes some time, at least the way I want to do it. But I do have this one as a read. I have the Big Magic. I got this Katie Bowman book, Diastasis Recti, which is when your stomach kind of begins to split apart, and there's things we do and the way we hold our bodies and all that cause it. Happens to men and women, but I've only heard of it with a few women like myself after having a pregnancy. I actually had a stomach hernia because of it. And so there's probably movements and things I was doing, maybe even exercises, that were worsening the problem when I thought they were improving it. She also has said that if you have neck and head issues or headache issues that sometimes come from body positioning, lifting and moving of the neck, a lot of times knitters get tension that causes headaches and things, that this is the best book for dealing with the shoulder girdle, head and neck also. So anyway, I got this one. And then this is part of my goals for the and I'm going to talk about it next week, my 2019 goals, but I wanted to walk more, and Walking Gone Wild is something by Dami Ross, who was recommended by Katie Bowman. She was interviewed on her podcast, and she's an older woman, and I'm really just excited to see, you can see a picture over here, excited to see what this book has in it. It's mostly just an encouragement to women that you don't shrivel up as you get older. You can actually have a resurgence of vibrancy, which was exciting for me because I've heard so many people say, well, maybe your migraines will get better when you either have a hysterectomy or hit menopause. I'm like, great. Because that's like a sentence of some sort, to hear as a woman. Well, when the change comes, life's never the same, So I was interested to read that and be encouraged because, I'm about to be 45, like in a day. So I'm not quite there, but I'm close. And then over the holidays, I started getting nostalgic, thinking of how I would visit my grandmother, and we would watch the Hallmark Hall of Fame movie. Before there was a Hallmark channel, there was the Hall of Fame movie. Once a month or a week or something, they would have these movies, and they were kind of sappy, and a lot of them were terrible. But there were a few I remembered liking, and she liked this one with me. We both liked it. And I would go, and she would fix us something to eat, and I'd lay on her bed, and she'd sit in her rocking chair, and maybe she'd be doing something while she sat there, and we would watch these VHSs she would tape during the week for me. And this was one we did. And so I got the DVD. It was like a few bucks. Love is Never Silent. It has that Mare Winningham. I don't even know if you remember her. I forgot about her, but it's sweet. It's not bad. It's a little hokey, but it won an award. It's an Emmy. It's not bad. And then this one was a Lifetime movie. Before Lifetime was quite like it is now, okay? And it's that Patricia Arquette movie. Diane Keaton directed it. This is really pretty good. Wildflower. This has got Beau Bridges. Is it William McNamara, I think, and Reese Witherspoon. This was one of the second thing I think I ever saw her in. It's a good movie too. It wasn't Hallmark Hall of Fame, but I don't watch the Hallmark Channel. I can't stand that stuff. But these are, and they make me feel really nostalgic, thinking of those things I would do with my grandmother. That's kind of sweet. So, please, my question for you is, goals for 2019. Do you have them? What are they? How'd you do on your 2018 goals? If you've already left me a little bit of crafting goals, but you want to leave something a little more meaningful, whatever, you can leave more. I saved the ones I had from this last week to talk about when I talk about mine next week. Also, anything you want to talk about with our knit along, please come join the group in Ravelry, because you can see everyone's projects, some of their thought processes, getting some advice about dyeing, and just some really friendly people in the hello thread. So I hope all of you are doing good, and that I hope you all enjoy my birthday. No. I just hope this is a really good year for all of us, a creative year, and I think there's going to be some big changes in me, for sure, and I hope the same is true for you. And as we change, we're everyone around us has some grace with us, helping us out and encouraging us, but that we are a better community for it. That's definitely what I want. So Bye.